Mahavir, Brahmagno Brahmahutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. Person, translation, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada. Person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. Conditioned soul entangled in material contamination, sure to act in the material atmosphere, yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahma, Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual. And the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahmajyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahmajyoti. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the results are all combined together. Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual identity. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory energy into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or a sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. So I'll read the verse again. Brahmarpanam Brahmahaivir, Brahmagno Brahmahutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to obtain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Om Vishnu Braya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paschatyade Satarne. The name of the movement that Prabhupada started is called Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness means become conscious of Krishna. Now, actually, Krishna consciousness means more than just becoming conscious of Krishna. The definition of Krishna consciousness is found in the Madhya Lila from the book of Srila Rupa Goswami, where he defines Krishna consciousness as Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati, Kriyatam Yati Yadi Kutopi Lavyate, Tatra Loyam Moyam Api Muyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukritar Nalavyate. So Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita, absorbed in the mellows of executing devotional service to Krishna. So the translation that's given in the Madhya Lila is, pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activities in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be obtained only by paying one price. That is intense greed to obtain it. If it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. So this absorption in the mellows of Krishna consciousness, there's a process to come to that stage. As I've many times explained, that we have karma yoga as one of the processes, there's jnana yoga, there's ashtanga yoga, and there's bhakti yoga. This is called the yoga ladder. Karma yoga means dutiful activities. We have to work in this world, and we all have a duty in the Varna and Ashram system, but we're not in the Varna Ashram system right now. We're in the material world of Kali Yuga, where everyone was born as a Shudra, Kalo Shudra Sambhava. And it's very rare that anyone gets an opportunity to elevate themselves from that platform. As a matter of fact, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, everyone is born as a Shudra in Kali Yuga, and by modern education, one becomes less than an animal. Because what does it mean to be less than an animal? Because animals, they're engaged like we are in eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But the animals are regulated in their eating, sleeping, mating, defending. A lion produces one child a year, and for the rest of the year, he's celibate. There are no Romeo lions. They have their quota, and they follow their quota. Similarly, there are other animals. They have a certain food that they eat. We don't, for instance, a lion does not eat halava. He's a strict meat eater. He believes that vegetables are bad for his health. Now, human beings, they can become unrestricted in their eating, their sleeping, their mating, and defending. There's a saying that there's one country that they'll eat anything that flies in the air except for a kite. Anything that's walking on the land except for a tank. And anything that's in the ocean except for a boat. So this is called unrestricted. And therefore, human beings who have unrestricted sense gratification are actually less than the animals who have a certain quota for gratifying their senses. Now, in the material world, everyone is conscious, and our consciousness doesn't depend upon simply an intellectual exercise. Our consciousness depends upon the modes of material nature that we're situated under. And according to the modes of material nature, whether it be goodness or passion or ignorance or a combination of all of them, then what we have is a certain vision on life. as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that the foolish, they cannot understand how the living entity quits his body or what kind of body he enjoys under the spell of material nature. But those whose eyes are trained with knowledge can see all this clearly. This training with eyes of knowledge is not simply a technological methodology of training the eyes. Basically speaking, the training comes from hearing. Hearing, first of all, how to recognize that everything in this material world actually comes from Krishna. As it says in one of the Puranas, the Vishnu Purana, Eka Desha Sitasya Gya Josna Vistarini Yata Parasya Brahmana Saktis Titedam Akilam Jagat. Whatever we see in this world is simply an expansion of different energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is exactly like a fire that spreads illumination for a long distance, although situated in one place. Just like the example of the sun is in one place, but it's illuminating the entire universe with sunlight and heat. Although the sun is localized, but we can say the sun is present in the sunlight. If there was no sun, there would be no sunlight, and sunlight is not simultaneously one, but different from the sun. Just like heat is simultaneously one, but different from the sun. So here the example is used that fire is in one place, but it's spreading all over. And therefore, what we see in our existence is Krishna's energy, which is simultaneously one, but different from Krishna. Although Krishna may not be personally present, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Maya tatamidam sarvam, jagada vyakti mortina, matstani sarvabhutani, na chaham te shavashtitaha. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. In other words, we're all in Krishna's energy. So in one sense, we're all connected with Krishna all the time. Krishna is really not different. Well, this energy that we're under is really not different from Krishna. It is exactly the same as Krishna, but it's not Krishna. So Krishna is simultaneously here all around us and also within our heart. Ishvara sarvabhutanam videshe arjunatishtiti ramayan sarvabhutani yantru rudani maya. That Arjuna, I'm directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material nature. It's not possible to be separated from Krishna in any way. The energy that we're under or in is Krishna's energy, and ultimately through his Maya, his material energy, he's directing the material nature, and he's also directing us. So at every moment, we're intimately connected with Krishna. Sometimes there's some question where we came from. Did we come from, I could say, were we ever not with Krishna? Actually, it's not possible not to be with Krishna, because even if we were in the Brahma Jyoti, we're still with Krishna's energy. And when we come here now, we're still with Krishna. Krishna, we're never separated from Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is everywhere, but why don't we realize him? Because we're covered by his illusory energy. And therefore we think that there's something besides Krishna. And because we think there's something besides Krishna, therefore we act as if there is something outside of Krishna. We think, we believe, and we act as if there is something apart from Krishna. So the first business, as I said, is that we have to find out what Krishna wants us to do. Now, we may not understand Krishna very much, but Varnashram Dharma is at least to find out what we can do so that we don't get ourselves into trouble. What is that trouble? The trouble is that the material nature works in such a way that when we believe that we are the proprietors of the material nature, then the material nature covers our consciousness like a cloud covers the sun. It covers our consciousness, and therefore we don't see things properly, and therefore we believe that we're not under the sun. We believe we're under the clouds. But actually the sun is always there, and indeed it's the sun who has created the clouds. The sun dries up water from the ocean and then creates clouds from it, and the clouds come and cover our vision of the sun. The sun is there, the clouds are there, and we're there, but our consciousness of the sun is not there. Similarly, when we act as if Krishna is not there, when we want to believe that Krishna is not there, then Krishna creates Maya for us. So we have doubts, or we don't believe that Krishna is actually there. And under the influence of the clouds, we don't understand about the sun. We have a little perception. If we're a little conscious, the sun might be there if it has some rays that shine through the clouds, and we may feel a little of the heat from the sun, but we're not very conscious of what the sun looks like, what the qualities of the sun are, and therefore we can say we're in darkness. So karma yoga is meant to at least give us the understanding, if we want to dissipate the clouds a little bit from our consciousness, we have to stop acting as if we're independent owners and proprietors of this material world, or that the material world is meant for our enjoyment. Now, one who recognizes that that the material nature doesn't belong to them, and that one should follow the law, that one should utilize Krishna's energies in Krishna's service, then they come to the platform, we could say, of Jnana Yoga. That is knowledge. To know that we're not the proprietors of this world, that this material world belongs to Krishna, that's some knowledge. And that comes from utilizing things not according to one's duty. But to actually understand what this material world is, that it's actually Krishna's energy, that's called knowledge. And in order to come to that platform of knowledge, then we have to act according to the instructions of Krishna. Not just do our duty, but find out what Krishna wants us to do directly in order to serve him. If we do that, then we can gradually perceive how this energy actually belongs to Krishna. Duty will get us out of illusion that it's ours, but service to Krishna under Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra will bring us to the platform of understanding who it belongs to. If you go to a store, you walk into the store, and you don't see anyone in the store, and you start putting things in your pocket, then they may come and arrest you. And if you claim, well, I didn't see anyone in the store, so I believe that the store just came here by chance, there was no creator, there was no proprietor, and therefore I just felt that it was proper for me to just take whatever I wanted. But when the police come and arrest the person who took whatever they wanted, then they're quite surprised. But at least they've learned some lesson that there are people who own the store, although they may not see them directly. Now, when you meet the proprietor of the store, that's even more knowledge. Or when you understand what the proprietor of the store wants you to do with the objects there, how much they cost if you want to buy one, that's more knowledge. But that's not sufficient for Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati, for Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the desire to please Krishna, to serve Krishna. Now, everyone has a tendency to love. It is not that if we don't try to please Krishna, we won't love anyone. We have a tendency to try and love someone. Probably gives the example that if a man doesn't have, or a woman doesn't have any wife or husband or children or friends, then they get a dog or a cat and try and love the dog and the cat. They'll love the dog and cat just like they love anyone else. Oh, Fifi, you're so beautiful. Ooh, I love you. So that's the nature of the soul. He has to have someone to love. If he doesn't love Krishna, he'll have to love someone in the material world. But if he loves someone in the material world in relation to Krishna, that's called Krishna consciousness. As a matter of fact, we're not only supposed to love Krishna, we're supposed to love everyone and everything in relationship to Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that Rasoham apsnukondiya pravasi shasi suryo pranava sarva vedeshu shabdake purusham drishu. I am the taste of water, and I'm the light and the sun and the moon. So we taste water, we should try to relish the taste of water, pure water. And remember Krishna, that Krishna is so kind, he's given us this water to taste. And if we taste that in water, in that spirit, then that's also relishing Krishna. We don't have to immediately go to Goloka Vrindavan and dance with the gopis and Krishna in the rasa dance. We can get some rasa even in this world by just drinking water and remembering Krishna. Not only will we be experiencing Krishna if we serve Krishna in that way, but we'll even be experiencing the water in its original taste, the taste of Krishna, its original pure taste. Prabhupada, as you probably know, even went so far as to say that if one is accustomed to drinking wine, if he drinks the wine and thinks that this taste of the wine is Krishna, then gradually he'll become a devotee. We don't recommend that. I don't think Prabhupada was recommending it. But by remembering Krishna, one will become purified. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that that's what we're trying to do, is come to the platform where we can see Krishna everywhere by following the process. Process is, again, accepting that everything we see around us is Krishna's energy. I remember one time I was in a temple in Dallas, Texas, in America. And I had two services there at that time. One of them was I was the treasurer and I was the Sankirtan leader. Unfortunately, the temple president had a tendency to spend more money than we were collecting, which is all right for some time, because for some time we had a number of brahmacharis in the temple who would go out regularly on book distribution and collect some donations. But gradually, one by one, the brahmacharis got married and I was the only one left. So I was the treasurer and the collector, and I saw our collections were less than our expenses. And Dallas, Texas at that time wasn't the most pleasant place in the world to distribute books, because this is in the 1970s and people in the South in America were considered quite racist against Black people, but against anyone who was from a different culture. And what to speak of a Hare Krishna devotee with a shaven head, wearing what they believed to be a dress. And they didn't like when men were wearing dresses. As a matter of fact, one time in Dallas, one of the times we went out on book distribution, because at that time there was no such thing. This is 1972. And at that time, there was no such thing as wearing pants. Devotees didn't wear pants. When you joined the temple, you gave your pants away. And so that's all we ever wore was dhotis, even if we were hitchhiking or wherever we went. So I was downtown Dallas. Generally, it was difficult to distribute back to Godheads there, but I was out of duty, not out of an intense desire, but out of duty. I went there, fighting my mind. She's telling me, why are you suffering like this? You should not go there. Anyhow, to some extent, I conquered my mind, got on the bus, wound up in downtown Dallas, Texas, and I got out of the bus, and suddenly everyone I saw looked like they came from Vaikuntha. I was in a completely different state of consciousness, as if I was in a entirely different world. And indeed, every time I offered someone a back to Godhead, the same people who usually would be ignoring me suddenly became very much interested and appreciative of what I was doing. And practically within a very short period of time, I distributed all the back to Godheads, got back on the bus, and the world that I was accustomed to reappeared. So there's a real world, and there's the world we're accustomed to. Krishna consciousness is to bring us into the real world and out of this world that we're accustomed to. What is the world that we're accustomed to? The world that we're accustomed to was created by our materialistic activities. For instance, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops lust. So that's especially modern world, but it's in every planet, throughout the whole universe. That's the occupation of the conditioned soul, to look around for something to enjoy. Modern society in so-called civilized countries has been organized in such a way as to encourage people to contemplate objects. As a matter of fact, people work during the week, or they used to work during the week. I don't know what they're doing now. And then they go on the weekend shopping, or maybe that's all they do now is shopping. I don't know. Different countries are different nowadays. And shopping means to go from store to store, looking at the endless varieties of things. Everything, at least in so-called civilized countries, there's endless varieties to choose from. One time, His Holiness Sridhar Maharaj was at Woodstock in Poland during one of the Indradu Maharaj's festival programs there. Woodstock is a big gathering where tens and thousands of young people would come, and they'd all be intoxicated. But and Sridhar Maharaj was giving a lecture to many of these intoxicated young people. And being a very enthusiastic preacher, he began to preach against or about the four regular principles, especially intoxication. And so one of the people in the crowd became very disturbed and threw a can of beer at Sridhar Maharaj on the stage to express his dissatisfaction with that part of the lecture. Sridhar Maharaj picked up the can of beer, looked at it and said, "This is not my brand." So, in the material world, everyone is used to endless varieties of choices. So they're contemplating all these different objects, and actually when they find what they're interested in, they feel attraction. We call it attraction. Some people call it love, romance, whatever you want to call it. Bhagavad Gita calls it calm or lust. It's not so romantic. You usually don't say to your girlfriend, I'm in lust with you. Or the girl doesn't say to the boy, actually, I'm in lust with you. You usually say, I'm in love with you, and that's acceptable. But the actual fact is that that attraction is not, it's an emotional attraction based upon the material experience. And when that lust is when we try to satisfy the lust, then it turns into greed. If we have the ice cream cone, or ojana, and we eat it and we like it, then naturally, if we have the hunger, then we want another one, or perhaps another one, up to the limit that before it comes out our ears. So that's called greed. And when greed cannot be satisfied, then we become frustrated. Oh, I have no more money, but I want another one. I need another ice cream, but I have no more money. Or I have the money, but there's no place left to put it in. So we become frustrated, angry. And that anger, that lust, the greed, they form over our consciousness a cloud of illusion. And that cloud of illusion puts us into a drama where, of course, we're the hero, we're the heroine, we have so many supporting actors in our drama, and we take it all very seriously, as if my drama is the most important drama that's going on in the universe. One time a devotee came to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm a very insignificant devotee, but I have a very, very big problem. So Prabhupada looked at the devotee and said, how can someone who's insignificant have a big problem? If you're insignificant, then your problems must be also insignificant. It's like if you could talk to an ant and the ant says, I have a very big problem. And you look at the ant and say, how can you're so small, how can you have a big problem? You're so small, you must have a small problem. In this universe, we're all very, very tiny, but we believe we have very, very big problems. But our real problem, the only problem we really have, according to Prahlad Maharaj, is that we've forgotten Krishna. That problem can be easily solved by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And chanting to call out to Srimati Radharani, to call out to Lord Shri Krishna, to kindly engage us in the devotional service. But we have to do it consciously. We know it's our duty, for those especially who are initiated, to chant Hare Krishna a regular amount of times, especially on japa beats. We know we should do it according to the instructions given by our acharyas and disciple succession. And we also know we should do it feelingly and lovingly. We know we should remember that when we're chanting, it's not just some sound vibration, that we're just trying to get our rounds done. We're actually calling out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna. And if we just do it consciously, then certainly they'll reciprocate. If we do it unconsciously, as we've heard the mantra, shnik, shnik, ram, ram, day, 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 hey, kitty, kitty, hey, kitty, kitty, hey, kitty, kitty. If we chant that mantra, then obviously Krishna will not think that we're referring to him. And at least in English, kitty means cat. And therefore, maybe a cat will come, but nothing more than that will come. So we should call out to Krishna, believing that we're in Krishna, we're in his energies, Paramatma is in our heart, giving us intelligence, how to chant nicely, and we should take shelter of him so we can call out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna. The result is if we remember Krishna, then we enter into the spiritual atmosphere, or as Prabhupada said, environment in the purport. And in that atmosphere, we'll begin to perceive how everything and everyone has a relation to Krishna, is related to Krishna. That we're never outside of Krishna, we're actually never outside of Krishna's direction. Because Krishna in our heart is always giving us remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Therefore, it's not possible not to have a relationship to Krishna. Unfortunately, people believe that they don't have a relationship to Krishna. They don't know about their relationship to Krishna, perhaps. Or if they know about their relationship with Krishna, they don't take it so seriously. And therefore, they believe that whatever desire they have, being influenced by the material nature and having certain desires, is as valid to serve those desires as it would be valid to serve Krishna. Now, as we know, the problem with that, as I already explained, is that when we serve desires, although we may call them love, romance, inspiration, creativity, whatever we may call it, outside of Krishna consciousness, inevitably or automatically, then the material nature will reciprocate with us and put us under a cloud of illusion. And in that cloud of illusion, we'll have fear, we'll identify ourselves with this body, we'll believe that we're threatened by non-existence, we'll be confused what to do in order to satisfy our desires and our anxieties, and we'll simply lose our proper direction, especially in the human form of life, so that we can actually liberate ourselves from our misconceptions of identifying ourselves with these gross and subtle bodies and revive our actual understanding of who we are in relation to Krishna. Therefore, in this verse, it explains that Krishna consciousness is not only, but it is also activities. We're not supposed to just work, and do some more work. We're also supposed to do that work with a proper understanding. In other words, Krishna consciousness means also consciousness. So we also have to be conscious of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that should be Krishna consciousness. We should be doing it to please Krishna. If we do it to please Krishna, then whatever we do, we'll be successful. Our success in life will not be material accumulation. In America, there was one sticker that they were putting on cars, and it said, whoever gets the most toys at the end of life wins. In other words, in America, and I guess nowadays in most parts of the world, they have credit cards. And even if you have no money, you can go out and spend money that you don't have in this lifetime, and perhaps you may not even have in your next lifetime. And that way you can fill up your house with all kinds of objects, tables, chairs, computers, radios, if they still have them, and other types of paraphernalia, games for your children, whatever, and just fill up your house so much so that, practically speaking, there's no room even to sit down because there's something even on your couches and chairs. And then you either get a storage place or you throw every 6 months, you throw things out, or you buy a bigger house and a bigger car to put everything into. And anyone who gets the biggest house, the most toys for the children, the most rooms in the house, then they win. Unfortunately, at the time of death, the more we get, the more we hankered for in order to get, the more we were in love with or lusting after, it depends how you see it, the more greedy we became, then we'll inevitably become frustrated when we have to lose everything at the time of death. And instead of being in love, we become in anger at our loss. And that anger will bring us into the lower realms of material existence. Therefore, although we may believe that we have so many choices to make in this material world and that it's an advancement of society, but actually it's not an advancement of society. Advancement of society is when people develop a higher consciousness called Krishna consciousness. We may have accumulated unlimited amounts of things. There is nothing wrong with that in one sense, if they're all being used in Krishna's service. Just like Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he was an extremely wealthy person. He dressed in silk for that time. Dressing in silk was considered to be very aristocratic.
Thank you.
He had a beautiful house he lived in. Niguna, you have to, yeah, there you go. He was living in a beautiful house. He had many servants. And one great devotee, Gadadhar Pandit, he was told that he should go and take Pundarik Vidyanidhi as his spiritual master. So he didn't believe it. He thought this person is just materialist. He went there with his devotee to see Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Pundarik Vidyanidhi was lying on a silken bed wearing silk. He was blowing smoke out of a hookah pipe. And Gadadhar Pandit thought, how is it possible that I'm going to take shelter of this materialistic person? So at that time, I believe it was, I forget the devotee, he began to sing a song, a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Aho Bhakti Swakuto, that Aho Bhakti, that how wonderful it is that this devotee, or this demon, Putana, that she came to poison Krishna by feeding him poisoned milk from her breast. Krishna took that milk from her breast, sucked out her poison and her life air and killed her. But she, by Krishna's mercy, became one of his mothers in Vaikuntha, or Goloka Vrindavan. How merciful Krishna is. So when Pundarik Vidyanidhi heard this from that great devotee singing it, he immediately began to roll on the ground in ecstasy. Therefore, Gadadhar Pandit understood that Pundarik Vidyanidhi was actually a great devotee, although externally he appeared to be a materialist. So sometimes we find that devotees are very renounced, like Sudama Brahman, who had nothing, went to see Krishna in Dwarka because his wife encouraged him to do so. And then Krishna apparently didn't give him anything during their association together, remembering their childhood pastimes in the Gurukul in Sandipani Muni's ashram. And Sudama was not at all disturbed when he left Dwarka that Krishna apparently didn't give him anything. He thought that why should Krishna give me anything? I may misuse it and become a materialistic person. But when he got home to his place where his former house was, he saw huge palaces, people walking in gardens, beautiful, magnificent gardens with varieties of birds and flowers and varieties of trees. And he thought, where am I? Maybe I lost my way. This is where I thought my former house was. And now it looks like I'm in some kind of heavenly planet. And then he saw this angelic woman come out from the house with her servants. And Sudama Brahman thought, that looks like my wife. How is this possible? So his wife bowed down before him and took Sudama into his now transformed house, which looked like it came, which was more opulent than the kingdom of Indra. Sudama realized that Krishna had benedicted him with this material opulence. But because he was in love with Krishna, he was determined only to use this opulence in the service of Krishna. And therefore, although he remained in a very material opulent situation, because he was always doing everything in service of Krishna, therefore at the end of his life, him and his wife went back to the spiritual world. Generally speaking, for most people, most devotees, that they should just accept whatever is necessary for their execution of devotional service. But it is found sometimes Krishna gives enormous opulence for his devotee, just so his devotee can utilize these opportunities that Krishna gives him in order to spread Krishna consciousness. And that way, one is always, if one utilizes everything in Krishna's service, then the material nature will not touch one, and one will always be able to perceive Krishna always and everywhere. So, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, they come and they give us instructions how to perform devotion, what is devotional service, how to perform it, and what will be the results. What will be what should be the transformation of our consciousness. And if we follow those instructions, then we should actually perceive or remember Krishna. And that we'll understand that Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, they're giving us the same message that Krishna within our heart is giving us. So we can never be outside of the realm of Krishna consciousness if we desire to be so, even while we're in the most difficult circumstances. The problem is when the circumstances are usually too simple or too easy, then people tend to forget Krishna. Krishna doesn't want people to forget him. That's why he's created this universe. Therefore, sometimes he puts not only individual people, but even whole societies into difficulty so that they can turn to Krishna. Even not only in this planet, but even in the heavenly planets. The demigods are constantly fighting against the demons. And sometimes the demons win, and sometimes the demigods win. But when the demons win, when the demigods are in trouble, then they turn to Krishna for help. When Bali Maharaj invaded the heavenly planets, then the demigods had to flee, and their mother, Aditi, went to her husband and asked him for help so that her sons could regain the heavenly planets. Her husband told her how to serve Krishna in such a way that Krishna would restore her children back to the heavenly planets. So Krishna is constantly even putting the demigods into difficulty, what to speak of our little selves, or what to speak of present society, which is so much deviated from the path of Krishna consciousness. So much misdirected by the materialistic education, the materialistic propaganda given by the asuras in this world. Therefore, Krishna arranges that people receive the reactions of their karma in such a way is that if they're put into the proper circumstances, if they get the proper association with the devotees, they can more easily take up the path of Krishna consciousness. Nothing happens by accident, nor is anything unjust. Krishna has one desire, that we all become conscious of him. Being unconscious of him is just artificial. It's not our natural position. And we can't be unhappy in an unnatural position any more than a fish could be happy outside of water. If you take a fish outside of water and you give the fish a nice house in a nice neighborhood, with a nice wife and children, bank balance, the fish will not be very happy, because without water, nothing can actually satisfy the fish. Similarly, we're as souls, we're used to swimming in an ocean of pleasure. Now we're in the desert of material existence, looking around for a drop of happiness. Only when we enter back into that ocean of happiness can we actually be satisfied. And that ocean of happiness is offered to us by not only chanting Hare Krishna, but simultaneously with chanting Hare Krishna, understand how to chant Hare Krishna and put that into practice to the best of our ability, and try to ascertain what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, so we can do more of what we're doing right and less of what we're doing wrong. We can't change our experience in this material world all of a sudden, but by the process of Krishna consciousness, one can gradually utilize the mind, the body, the mind, our intelligence, our faith, our existence, gradually utilizing Krishna's service. And whatever we do in that regard will be good for ourselves and good for anyone else we come in contact with. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Jiva Tattva does.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Talking about deviation from chanting properly. And sometimes the kirtan leaders, they come in a trance and they sing Ramo instead of Rama. So how to, can you say something about how to react to that? It's difficult to correct.
Well, if we can't correct it, then we should remember Rama instead of Ramo.
Yes.
I don't know who Ramo is, but at least we should remember either Lord Balaram or Lord Ramachandra. But I don't think we should become disturbed. There are many people chanting things which are much worse than Ramo in this world. So we should appreciate at least someone who's closer to Ram than others. If you go on the internet, you probably would be very happy to find someone chanting Ramo rather than everything else they're chanting. So if they're chanting in the temple, then at least appreciate that they're closer to Rama than anyone else in this material world is. At least in the present society.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
How a devotee can identify his zones of spiritual growth if he believes that he has no shortcomings? How a devotee can gain a taste of spiritual development if he suffers but nothing to do with his difficulties?
if I understand your question correctly, what happens if a devotee doesn't believe that he has any faults, but he still suffers? Is that right? Well, there's two possible things. One is to live in the temple for a little while, and the devotees will enlighten one with all one's difficulties. We'll try at least convince one. And if that's not possible, then get married, and the wife will help out, or the husband will help. So one way or the other. But the worst thing is not to associate with the devotees, because the material nature is always convincing us that we're perfect, powerful, and happy. And Krishna is always trying to convince us that we're imperfect, we have no power, and that we're suffering. Ha ha, Prabhu Nityananda, Premananda, Sukhi. My dear Lord Nityananda, you're always full of transcendental bliss, and I am dukhi. I'm always suffering. So please give me some mercy so I can become happy. So anyone who believes that they're not suffering, then that is a very difficult position. Because if you believe you're already there, there's no place to go. If you believe you're already in perfection when you're actually in ignorance, then there's nowhere to go up. All you can do is go down. But as I said, the devotees will help. And if you don't like to associate with the devotees, at least get a wife. And even your dog, probably, if you only had a dog, your dog will get frustrated after some time and probably try to enlighten you also. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Yes.
What does a devotee sacrifice in order to become a pure devotee?
Well, the only thing we really have to sacrifice is our false ego. But that's a little difficult to sacrifice, because the thing we love the most is our false ego, our material delusion that we're living under. Because in the material world, even we're suffering, but we believe that we're actually becoming more noble the more we suffer. There are 7 different indirect rasas and 5 direct rasas. So one of these indirect rasas is the ghastly rasa. So even when we're in a miserable condition, we're actually believing that we're the hero in that miserable condition. So this is all false ego. Now, how to get rid of false ego? We have to accept our real ego as being dasa, dasa, anudasa, Krishna. The dasa, anudasa of Krishna, the servant of Krishna. Gopi Bhava, let's see. Naham Vipra Nachar Narapatir Naham Vapi Nasudro, Gopi Bhartu Parakamalayor, Dasa Dasa Anudasa. So the Gopi Bhartu Parakamalayor, the maintainer of the gopis, were the servant of his servant of his servants. And if we're doing something in that humble way, tolerating and doing something to please Krishna, then the result will be that we'll be working with our real ego, with our real identity, and our false ego will disappear. Just like when the sun comes out, then all the fog gets dissipated. The strength of the rays of the sun dissipate the fog. So the fog of our consciousness, the delusion of ourselves being separate from Krishna, the false identity we've assumed would be dissipated when we work with our real conception of life. And then Krishna will reciprocate and manifest the rays of his spiritual energy, and our false ego and our false conceptions will be dissipated, just like the sun dissipates fog in the morning. So to understand our real position as servants of Krishna, and to try to apply that within our lives, will make our lives more and more Krishna conscious. Therefore, Suniti, when Dhruva Maharaj was quite angry that why my father would not permit me to be on his lap, and my stepmother Suruchi actually forbid me from sitting on the lap of my stepfather. So Dhruva Maharaj was advised by his mother Suniti, don't be angry at your father, don't be angry at your stepmother, that this would be very bad for your consciousness. Still, Dhruva Maharaj, being a Kshatriya, he wanted a kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather, and therefore, not out of anger for the mistreatment by his father and his stepmother, but to get a kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather, he went to the forest looking for Krishna, because on the instructions of his mother. So, looking for Krishna is very good. Of course, under the instructions of Narada Muni, he transformed Dhruva Maharaj's consciousness by following the process. So ultimately, he gave up the desire to get a kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. Instead, he fell in love with Krishna, and when he fell in love with Krishna, then all his material desires went away by his properly executing the instructions of his guru, Narada Muni. Worshipping the deity, chanting Hare Krishna, and performing tapasya in Krishna's service. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Antaryami Prabhu wants ask question.
Okay, we have one more question.
Dear Gurudeva, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for the lecture. If some person, is it true that if some person try worship to another person and takes karma of this person, that this happens because one person do this without any Krishna consciousness?
I know that we don't take karma from others, generally speaking, unless we purify them. What we do is we take association. And by taking association, we may become inspired to do the same thing that they're doing. Especially, we find that, as Krishna says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or as Maharaj Shabde says in the, is it Maharaj Matir? No, it's Prahlad Maharaj. Andaya tandera upagiyamanas te pisha tantra urudami bada. Everyone has some leader, everyone has some example that they follow. Wherever the person's going that we're following, we're going to go to the same place. Now, Krishna has various energies, and one of the energies is manifested when people have certain qualities, whether it be wealth or beauty or fame or strength or knowledge. So they may be attractive to us. Especially wealth is very attractive in this age. So when people are attracted to wealth and they want to become wealthy like some other person, they get instructions and they become inspired by their example, and therefore they wind up eventually in the same position that that person winds up in, due to lack of knowledge. For instance, if we're simply searching for wealth in this material world, or we admire only people who are wealthy and opulent, and even if we become wealthy or opulent, then at the time of death, as I already explained, that when we lose that opulence, because everything at the time, Mrityu Saraharastraham, Krishna says, as death, I take everything away, then whatever we have accumulated due to our desire to be happy in the material world turns into a great frustration and anger when we have to lose it. And that anger and frustration brings us into a more degraded form of life in the next lifetime. So we aspire for things that are temporary, then we also have to get the reactions for them and that usually is not very pleasant. So for short-term gain, we may get long-term problems. All right.
Thank you very much.
Bhagavataru, or thank you very much.
Yes, sure.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hi.
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Prahladananda Swami
Diva.
Ki.
Hi.
Jai.
Krishna.
Jai. Shri Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.